The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our information session for First 5 LA's social media and digital marketing request for qualifications. Next slide. This webinar is being recorded. The recording will be posted on our funding center where this RFQ is posted. And I wanted to go over a couple house rules and reminders before we delve into our presentation today. Please remember to mute your phone or your computer microphone to ensure we do not have any audio difficulties. And for questions, please submit questions via the questions panel throughout the presentation. Please refrain from using the raise your hand or chat functions. And we will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we will address your questions. So just before we begin, let's do a quick check-in with our technology to make sure everyone can hear me. So please raise your hand if you can hear me clearly through the raise hand function. Great, I think that seems like everyone can hear me. So we want to begin our session by introducing our team. We have a few folks from First 5 LA from our communications department and contract administration and purchasing department. First, we have Gabriel Sanchez, who's our director in our communications department, and Marlene Fitzsimmons, manager of strategic initiatives. For contract administration and purchasing, we have Sable Morales, our manager, and myself, Ewan Nune, contract compliance officer. Please also note that I will be your main point of contact for anything related to this RFQ. Next slide. So on the screen, you will find an agenda for today's presentation. First, we will do a brief overview of First 5 LA as a public agency, and then we will do a project overview and review the eligibility and desired qualifications, required documents, and timeline for the RFQ. We will then conclude with a Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we will address your questions. Next slide. For those of you not familiar with us as an organization, First 5 LA is a public agency established in 1998 following the passage of Prop 10 by California voters, which enacted a state tax on cigarettes. We are a funder, collaborator, and advocate focused on supporting children prenatal through age 5. And we prioritize this age as it is a critical window of time given that 90% of a child's brain is developed by age 5. First 5 LA's refined 2020-28 strategic plan articulates the organization's North Star, and that is that by 2028, all children in Los Angeles County will enter kindergarten ready to succeed in school and life. The new plan will help guide and accelerate all that First 5 LA does to make a tangible difference in the lives of children today and tomorrow. And to reach, next slide. And to reach our North Star, First 5 LA wants systems to work better for all families in LA County by making them more family-centered and child-focused with a focus on 4 results areas that include families that have the resources, opportunities, relationships, and environments to optimize their child's development. Children enter kindergarten without any previously unidentified developmental delays and are connected to developmentally appropriate services and supports. And children are safe from abuse, neglect, and other trauma. And finally, children have high quality early care and education experiences prior to kindergarten entry. Now that we have completed providing an overview of First 5 LA, my colleague Gabriel will provide us with a brief background on the use of communications as a key strategy to achieve our outcomes.
Great. Thank you, Ewan. I just wanted to share briefly how First 5 LA sees communications, and that is we seek to use communications and marketing strategies to help educate and raise awareness of the importance of early childhood development in order to drive the change of norms, attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs so young children are prioritized in policy and budget decisions. We also look at communications as a vehicle to help create lasting, equitable changes to policies, programs, and systems of care, such as early education and healthcare systems, so that they work better to address the needs of children and their families in LA County. Next slide, please. So we're using communications in order to help implement and contribute to the advancement of our 2020-2028 strategic plan. Specifically, we're using communication strategies that build our brand as an advocate, partner, funder, convener, and expert source. We're also using communications to engage, educate, and influence decision makers, including, but not limited to, state policymakers, local elected officials, county agencies, community leaders, business leaders, and leaders at higher education institutions. We also are using communications to elevate awareness on the importance of early childhood development, and we seek to create urgency to address these issues and improve conditions that impact young children and their families. And lastly, we also are using communications and strategies to drive support for internal communications to advance our own agency goals.
Okay. Thank you, Gabriel. This is Marlene. For the next 3 slides, we're just going to go over the project overview for the social media and digital marketing RFQ. First 5 LA is seeking an agency to provide social media and digital marketing services, specifically to provide strategic, data-driven, creative concepts to maximize reach and engagement of target audiences and build upon current and future social media and traditional marketing campaigns. This includes creative asset production, paid media strategy, content strategy and planning, online community management and general account management, as well as the ability to measure and report on the impacts of executed strategies and tactics. Next slide, please. So here we have our primary audiences listed, and they're as follows: policy and decision makers, parents, the general public, community members, and partners. Existing First 5 LA social media and digital channels are also listed here. We have a main website, first5la.org, and we have our parenting website, which is first5la.org/parenting. You can find First 5 LA on social media at First 5 LA on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Next slide, please. So the overall goal is to design insightful social media and digital marketing campaigns that inform, educate, and encourage target audiences to take action by becoming champions for young children and their families, and/or change behavior and beliefs. So for the scope of work in the following few slides, we'll just kind of go over the details listed in the RFQ. The scope of work is intended to, 1, advance the understanding of early childhood development, to build and sustain public will to support the necessary changes to systems to make them work better for children and their families. And then lastly, to influence changes in norms, attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs to prioritize young children consistent with our 2020-28 strategic plan, as well as First 5 LA's mission, value, and vision. Next slide, please. So the scope of work listed here begins with planning. So this includes designing comprehensive, holistic social media plans that meets the determined objectives and addresses the needs of First 5 LA target audiences. Production and creative. This includes writing, design, capturing, and producing all social content, including social post copy and graphics for First 5 LA social media and digital channels. Account management includes being responsive to First 5 LA's requests in a timely manner, tracking projects against budget allocations, maintaining project timelines, etc. Event coverage and production. This is pre-event social media planning, which includes developments of social media copy and assets, as well as on-the-ground live coverage of special events. Examples of this could be live streaming events on Facebook or Instagram. Next slide, please. Campaign development. Topics will vary, but complement the outcome areas of the 2028 strategic plan. Influencer marketing. To build upon and expand First 5 LA's partnership with LA County-based parenting and community influencers to help achieve overall marketing objectives. Community management. This is managing and cultivating First 5 LA's online community. This includes monitoring conversations and being responsive to comments and questions from our audiences. It also includes identifying trending topics and opportunities that will align with First 5 LA's mission. Next slide, please. Paid media strategy. This is to develop unique platform-driven strategies to increase awareness, consideration, and conversion of target audiences through paid media planning and buying. This is including but not limited to target digital ads on multiple platforms, including Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Cross collaboration with other agencies. This is key for First 5 LA's communications department for agencies to work together in a holistic way to provide additional support to support our strategic initiatives. Email marketing. Evaluate current email marketing strategies, techniques, outcomes, and metrics to determine an overarching strategy for list aggregation and segmentation to allow for more effective and efficient communication. Lastly, here we have web analytics. This is to utilize analytics of both First 5 LA's main and parenting websites to optimize content based on user interests. Next slide, please. Optimization. Consistent results-focused testing and calibration of all social media messaging and paid media advertising. Reporting. Deliver reports to review campaign performance. Provide analytics and insights based on mutually determined key performance indicators. Crisis monitoring. To provide in-depth social media monitoring as well as proactive and reactive strategies and messaging in the event of a crisis or emergency, including but not limited to natural disasters, a major crime event, or greater issues of public health and safety. Further crisis-specific initiatives may occur and will be considered on a case-by-case basis. Lastly, here we have multilingual content development. Create content in the top 4 languages spoken in LA County, which include English, Spanish, Chinese, and Tagalog, while also respecting cultural differences. Next slide, please. And I'll pass it over to Yuen.
Thank you, Marlene. So for the terms of this project, the expected project term is 4 years and 9 months, with a total project amount not to exceed $4 million for that period. The initial 9-month agreement is for an amount not to exceed $800,000. It's slated for an anticipated start date of October 1st, 2020, and would end during our end of the fiscal year of June 30th, 2021. This project will include a blended retainer and task order contract, which means that certain services will be included in the retainer, and then other projects as they come up will be included in task orders. And First 5 LA will work with the awarded contractor to negotiate the retainer and task orders. Next slide. So we'll cover the eligibility requirements and desired qualifications. Starting with the eligibility requirements, the proposer must meet the following requirements presented on your screen. Must have a business location in Southern California and must have the ability to be on site and to attend meetings at First 5 LA's office as needed when requested by First 5 LA. In the online application, proposers will be asked these questions. Please note that these requirements will be reviewed in Level 1 review, and proposers that do not meet these requirements will not advance to the next level of review, which is review of the proposal. We will discuss levels of review shortly in the presentation. And now Marlene will discuss the desired qualifications and experience.
Thank you, Yuen. Under desired experience and qualifications here, we have listed experience in affecting public opinion related to First 5 LA's target outcome areas, as well as experience in planning and implementing social and behavioral change marketing. Additionally, strategic social media and digital planning for nonprofit organizations and public agencies, strategizing social media and digital marketing plans based on changing needs of a client, experience in carrying out paid media planning and buying on behalf of a client, as well as cultivating and leveraging partnerships with organizations whose missions align with First 5LA. And lastly, here on this slide, crafting social media and digital content in a variety of styles for a diverse, multicultural, multilingual audience. Next slide, please. We're also looking for experience in integrating multiple platforms to reach and engage a mix of diverse, multicultural, multilingual audiences. Experience in content development to support medium to large scale websites, utilizing a variety of emerging technologies and platforms, fostering collaborative relationships with a client's partners and influencers, crisis communication consulting, planning, and messaging, experience in training diverse stakeholders on social media practices, evaluating and assessing the effectiveness and reach of social marketing campaigns, as well as developing creative briefs, research, and concept testing for diverse audiences. Next slide, please. And I'll turn it back to you, Ed.
Thank you. So we'll be covering now the required documents and selection process. Proposers must submit all required documents through our online application process, which we will discuss shortly. We have also provided you with Appendix B, an application checklist, to ensure you have provided a complete application. Omission of any documents or forms may constitute an incomplete proposal and may be grounds for disqualification. The required documents for this RFQ are the online application, a narrative of qualifications and relevant experience not to exceed 10 pages, 2 work samples not to exceed 5 pages for each sample, an Appendix C, which is a template to provide your proposed monthly and hourly rates, and Appendix D, which is our litigation and contract compliance form, and finally, a business license if it's applicable to you. Next slide. The online application is how you will submit your documents for the proposal. So in order to respond to this RFQ, proposers must complete an online application form and submit all required documents specified below through the online application system. Proposers must set up an online account in order to access the application form. Instructions on setting up the account and access to the online application can be found at this link. And if you encounter any issues with creating an online account, feel free to reach out to me. Next slide. One of the documents all proposers must submit is the narrative of qualifications and experience. There are several key items that must be addressed as provided in the RFQ, which include the following. Explain your agency's process for planning and implementing a comprehensive social media digital marketing plan. Explain what your typical considerations would be and what is your process. For example, incorporate the use of a creative brief process, concept development, pre-production, and work plan phases. Also provide a narrative of your agency's knowledge, expertise, and current capacity to carry out the following components in the scope of work that is provided in the RFQ. And we're focusing on the social media digital marketing strategies and the social media digital marketing campaigns to address key issues. Next slide. In addition, the narrative should address the following related to your proposed team. Describe the proposed team members' expertise as related to the desired expertise and experience noted in Section 6, desired experience and qualifications. And the narrative should include each team member's location and indicate whether subcontractors will be used. The team is expected to be diverse in expertise and may include account director, supervisor, and/or executive and creative lead, as well as researchers. And if subcontractors are contemplated, identification of those persons or firms, their proposed scope of work, how they were selected and why, and a description of how subcontracted work will be controlled, monitored, and evaluated. Finally, include in your narrative a description of the proposed team's project management capabilities. Next slide. Proposers are also required to submit 2 work samples, and the sample should demonstrate that your agency's experience and expertise, and the sample projects should include a creative brief and approved budget for each sample submitted. Slide. We have provided an Appendix C for all proposers to submit, which requests a quote for your monthly retainer and hourly rates for key personnel. Next slide. Appendix D, litigation and contract compliance form, is required. An omission of this form will constitute an incomplete proposal and may be grounds for disqualification. Please read the information on the required litigation and contract compliance form thoroughly and include a signed copy by the proposal date. This will also be submitted through our online application system. If you checked yes to any of the questions on the form, please explain the circumstances for the response and explain whether this will impact the project. So first 5 LA will review the proposers based on the multi-stage review process detailed here. Proposals must score satisfactorily in each level of review as applicable. Level 1 internal review is where first 5 LA will evaluate all proposals for completeness and minimum requirements. Minimum requirements include timely receipt of proposal, submission of all required documents, and adherence to eligibility requirements. Proposals with omissions of any required documentation are subject to disqualification. First 5 LA will also conduct a due diligence review that includes a review of the litigation and contract compliance form and a review of whether proposer, those who are current and former contractors, grantees, and vendors, currently remains placed in non-compliance status by First 5 LA under any existing and past agreement with First 5 LA. And First 5 LA reserves the right to request additional information if needed to validate eligibility and/or minimum requirements. Proposers that pass level 1 internal review will proceed to level 2 proposal review. Reviewers will consist of First 5 LA staff, and prior to beginning their review, reviewers will be assessed for conflicts of interest with proposers, including subcontractors. And they will sign a conflict of interest form to certify that there are no conflicts of interest. Proposal reviewers will score proposals using the review tool listed as Appendix A Level 2 review tool, which we will go over shortly. Reviewers will participate in a calibration session prior to finalizing scores. Highly scoring proposals from Level 2 review will proceed to Level 3 interview. Interviews will be held virtually as an online meeting or via telephone, and the interview panel will be comprised of First 5 LA staff. Reviewers will participate in a calibration session prior to finalizing scores. Note that further written materials may be requested prior to or after the interview, and First 5 LA reserves the right to schedule additional interviews, meetings, should additional questions arise. Reference checks will be completed after Level 3 interview, and proposers will be asked to submit references after Level 3 interview to provide references for similar work. First 5 LA must be able to contact a minimum of 2 references provided by the proposer, and if 2 references cannot be reached, First 5 LA may deem the proposer ineligible for this opportunity. In addition, past and current performance under a First 5 LA agreement, if applicable, will inform the final decision of award. And the highest scoring proposer from the combined score of Level 2 proposal review and Level 3 interview, in combination with information obtained through reference checks, will be recommended for award of the contract to the Board of Commissioners. Next slide. As mentioned previously, proposal reviewers will use Appendix A to evaluate all proposals. So in completing your proposal, please reference this appendix, the review tool, for further details to inform how your responses will be evaluated and how certain review criteria are weighted as part of your total score for Level 2 proposal. Next slide. Please always reference the RFQ itself for details related to this solicitation. Applications that fail to adhere to First 5LA's page limitation requirements will be adjusted by the removal of pages from the application. Pages will be removed before the proposal review, and the removed pages will not be made available to reviewers. Failure to submit all required documents will constitute an incomplete proposal and may be grounds for disqualification. Proposers are responsible for any errors and omissions in their proposals and applications. It is the responsibility of the proposer to ensure prior to submission that its proposal reflects the requirements of this solicitation. Proposers should not wait to submit documents through the online application system minutes before the closing time. First 5LA will not be responsible for any delays proposers may encounter with the online application system due to multiple proposers uploading documents before the closing time. First 5LA shall not be liable for any costs incurred in connection with a proposer's preparation of a proposal in response to this RFQ. Any cover letters, resumes, and CVs, including attached materials submitted in response to this RFQ, shall become First 5LA's property and subject to public disclosure. And finally, please remember that proposals received after the deadline will not be considered, and the deadline is June 11th, 5 p.m. Pacific time. If there are any updates to the solicitation, it will be issued as an addendum to the solicitation. Please check the Funding Center webpage regularly for updates and addenda. First 5LA has the right to amend this solicitation by written addendum, and First 5LA is responsible only for that which is expressly stated in the solicitation document and any authorized written addenda thereto. Such addenda shall be made available via the online Funding Center. Failure to address the requirements of such addendum may result in the proposal not being considered at the sole discretion of First 5LA. Addenda to this solicitation, if any, will be posted on First 5LA's website, which may be accessed by clicking this link. It is the responsibility of proposers to ensure prior to submission that their application reflects the most recent information in RFQ requirements. Next slide. So let's go over the timeline for this, for the RFQ. So we are here right now at the information session, and written questions and requests for additional information should be submitted to me via email no later than June 2nd. And we will be posting all of our responses to all of the questions we've received by June 8th. And remember that the proposal due date is June 11th, and save the date for interviews expected to be between July 7th and 9th. Dates are subject to change at First 5LA's sole discretion. Next slide. So that concludes the substantive part of our presentation. We will place you on a brief hold while we review your questions to see what we can address during the remainder of our time today. Any questions that are not responded to during today's webinar will be responded to in written form and will be posted on our funding site, which we just discussed. As detailed in the RFQ, all questions should be submitted to the email address on the screen. Thank you to those who have already submitted questions. We are currently reviewing all questions and will provide responses soon, in addition to posting all responses on our website by the posting date. So thank you for your patience as we have received a high volume of questions. All questions, including those submitted via the questions box of this webinar, will be included in a posting of questions as described in the timeline of the RFQ.
Okay, thank you so much, Yuen. Just to jump in while our presentation panel go ahead and catches up a bit, we're gonna just answer a few questions that are coming in. A reminder, like Yuen had mentioned, we will not be answering all the questions during today's webinar, but we will do our best to answer a few, and we thank you again for your patience as we work through the amount of questions that we're getting. And we encourage you to go ahead and submit them on the questions box, And if for any reason a question comes up that you didn't think about during this webinar and you want to propose it to First 5LA, make sure that you email that to UN by the date specified in the timeline. Her email is listed on the screen now. So one of the first questions we got was about crisis monitoring. Do you need somebody to be on call 24/7 to respond within an hour or less in the event of emergency, or to have a response after 4+ hours and then to monitor? So it's a really great question. Thank you for submitting it. Marlene is going to go ahead and further elaborate on what we mean by crisis monitoring related to the scope of work.
Thank you, Sable. Yeah, to further elaborate on what we mean by crisis monitoring isn't necessarily a 24/7 availability. A very tangible example, obviously, is the current public health crisis we're in now. That would be a request from us to maybe put together a crisis monitoring plan for a defined period of time, but we're not necessarily asking you to continue to monitor 24/7.
Thank you.
Hopefully that provides a little bit more clarity. Thank you.
And then just again, we're going to keep looking through some of these questions and seeing what we can go ahead and answer within the time that we have today. So another question we got, which I'm happy to provide an answer to now, is how many agencies are participating in this response? So First 5LA does not currently know how many agencies are participating in this response. We will not know the answer to that until we have closed this funding opportunity, and then we'll have the list of who responded. Same thing with the webinar. We won't know how many total participants we have on the webinar until we know once the webinar is actually closed, and then we can have a full tally. So not information that we can answer now, but we do encourage you to ensure that you are reviewing our timeline and ensuring that you are posing your questions and submitting a response within the timeline provided. Another question we got, which is something we can answer, is will we receive an email confirmation receipt once the RFP is uploaded? So I'm going to take a stab at answering this question, but please feel free to clarify through the questions box if I am misinterpreting your question. But once you create an online account, and the link is presented in the RFQ and on the webpage where the RFQ is posted, and also in this presentation that is being recorded and posted after today, there is an online link of where you need to log in to create an account. And then once you create an account, you will then be prompted to upload all required documents to provide a response to this RFQ. Once you submit, you will receive an email confirmation that your application has been received. I'm hoping that answers your question, but if not, feel free to go ahead and pose it again in the questions box. We're happy to elaborate. So just scrolling down to see these questions. Okay. Again, we're getting a lot of really great questions. We're just reading through them, and we'll be right back with you with some more Q&As in just a bit. Thank you for bearing with us.
Okay, so one of the questions we received is, are you looking for resumes for key personnel or just short experience descriptors? We would prefer just short experience descriptions since that is part of your narrative. And so just be mindful of the page limitation as you submit your response.
Okay, so we have another question, and it's asking for clarification on what we mean by cross collaboration with other agencies to work together. The request is to further elaborate on what we mean by that. Marlene will be answering that question.
Sure. What we mean by collaboration with other agencies is that the First 5 LA communications team will also be working with, a PR and creative agency services as well. So we're just asking that the agencies collaborate and work holistically on certain projects.
Thank you, Marlene. Okay, so we're getting a lot of really, really great questions. They are questions that do require further review to ensure that we're providing very detailed responses to help inform your proposals. So as we mentioned, we will be responding to questions as we receive them, as long as they are received before the deadline of the timeline. Let me just go back to that timeline on our screen, just so everybody is, just so everybody is clear on that. So please make sure to continue to submit your questions if you have not already done so via email or through the questions box during today's webinar. Questions are required to be submitted by June 2nd, and we will respond individually to each person who is asking a question, and then we will also post responses to all the questions and responses that we've provided on our website where the RFQ is posted by June 8th. Thank you again for your patience as we go through the questions and work with our team to provide very detailed responses to help support your development of your proposal. Again, if for any reason you did not submit a question during the webinar today and a question comes up later, please make sure that you email that to Yuen. Her email is currently on the screen and is also listed as a contact person for this RFQ. And we will ensure that all questions are answered and all responses are definitely posted on our website so everybody has access to that information. At this point, I'll hand it back to our panel just for formal goodbyes, and then we'll end today's presentation.
This is
Sable.
Well, thank you so much for everyone's interest in this RFQ. Again, this is Yuen, so I will be your main point of contact moving forward. So please feel free to reach out with questions before the designated deadline for submission of questions. Thank you, guys.
Perfect. And thank you, everyone.